They say the day a woman gives birth is the day her heart changes forever. For Vanessa, that day came and passed like it meant nothing. The hospital room was quiet except for the weak cry of a newborn baby. Nurses moved around gently, smiling, celebrating new life. A tiny baby girl lay wrapped in white cloth, her face red, her lips trembling as she searched for her mother's warmth. But Vanessa lay on the bed, scrolling through her phone. No tears of joy, no smile, no words like "my baby." She was already worried about something else. Her lifestyle. Vanessa was popular. In the city, everyone knew her face. Parties, clubs, expensive restaurants, late nights, loud laughter, flashing cameras. Men admired her, women envied her. She lived for attention and money, not responsibility. The pregnancy had slowed her down. The baby felt like a mistake. The baby's father disappeared the moment Vanessa told him she was pregnant. Not even a goodbye. Just silence. That was how Vanessa became a single mother. Not because she chose love, but because she was abandoned. When the nurse placed the baby on her chest, the baby cried softly, instinctively searching for breast milk. Vanessa turned her face away. "Can someone take her?" she said impatiently. That was the first rejection. By evening, Vanessa had already made a decision. She was not going to raise this child herself. That same night, the very day she gave birth, she hired a house help. Her name was Grace. Grace arrived quietly with a small bag and lowered eyes. She looked young, fragile, and respectful. Her voice was soft when she greeted Vanessa. "I can take care of babies, madam," she said. Vanessa didn't ask about experience, didn't ask about background, didn't ask about character. All she wanted was freedom. She handed the baby over like a parcel. "Make sure she doesn't disturb me," Vanessa said coldly. Grace nodded. From that moment, Vanessa stopped acting like a mother. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The baby was only 3 months old, but she already knew hunger, loneliness, and silence. Vanessa never breastfed. She never checked feeding time. She never asked if the baby cried. If the baby cried at night, Vanessa shouted from her room, "Grace, do something." And Grace would do something. Sometimes that something was ignoring the baby. Sometimes it was leaving her hungry. Sometimes it was rough hands handling a fragile body. The baby cried often, not the playful cry of a healthy child, but the weak, painful cry of a baby begging for food and comfort. Grace hated the sound. "Shut up," she would whisper angrily. She would carry the baby carelessly, sometimes shaking her too hard, sometimes dropping her back into the crib without care. Meanwhile, Vanessa lived like she had no child. She left home before sunrise and returned past midnight, smelling of alcohol and perfume, laughing into her phone, posting pictures online. Slay Queen vibes. People commented. No one saw the child. Sometimes, Vanessa didn't come home at all. And when she did, she never asked the most important question. Has my baby eaten? 3 months old, and already forgotten. Late at night, when the house was silent, the baby would cry softly, her voice weak from hunger. No one came. She cried until sleep took her mother alive, a child breathing, but love, completely absent. At first, Grace had been quiet, polite, obedient, almost too respectful, but beneath that calm face, something cold had begun to grow. The baby's cries, once soft and occasional, were now constant. Hunger gnawed at her tiny body. Loneliness seeped into her soul like cold water, and Grace. She no longer tried to hide her impatience. "Shut up," she hissed one afternoon, snapping her fingers. The baby flinched, startled, but did not stop. She was too weak to understand, yet too alive to give up. Vanessa, of course, was nowhere to be found. The house was empty, silent. Except for the cries Grace had grown to resent. Why are you crying all the time? Grace muttered under her breath, pacing the room. Your mother doesn't care. Why should I? And with that, the first signs of true neglect appeared. The baby's suffering. The baby's world had shrunk to 4 walls, a crib, and the shadowy figure of Grace. Her tiny hands reached for warmth, for comfort, for a mother who didn't come. Sometimes Grace would feed her, but only when it was convenient. Other times, she ignored the cries altogether, letting hunger stretch hours into agony. The baby's cries became weaker each day, a soft, desperate sound. Hunger had started to change her face, her skin, her eyes. Gone was the redness of a healthy newborn, replaced by pale, delicate skin that seemed almost transparent under the harsh apartment lights. But still no one noticed. Vanessa never asked. Vanessa never checked. Vanessa had already walked away emotionally. Grace's true nature revealed. Grace's smile to the outside world was different from her behavior, behind closed doors. When neighbors came by, she was polite, friendly, sweet. She smiled, nodded, acted like the perfect helper. But when the door closed, her hands could be rough, her voice sharp. Stop crying, useless child, she whispered one night. The baby's small arms flailed, searching for comfort that would not come. Grace ignored the struggle, placing her roughly back in the crib. It was as if the baby's very existence was an inconvenience, a burden to be managed minimally. And still, Vanessa had no idea. Vanessa's ignorance. Vanessa's life outside the apartment was loud and busy. Nightclubs, parties, expensive dinners, photo shoots, influencer, gigs, likes, followers, comments, attention. She posted selfies with her glossed lips and long lashes. She tagged her favorite clubs and shared stories of her glamorous life. And somewhere between the flashing lights and Instagram filters, she forgot. She had a child. When she occasionally glanced toward the crib, she assumed the baby was fine. Grace assured her everything was fine. And that was enough. Vanessa had no idea that the baby's cries were not just noise. They were warnings, signals of hunger, fear, and pain. A neighbor notices. One afternoon, a neighbor walking by heard the faint, pitiful cries of a baby. She knocked on the door. Hello? Is everything okay with your baby? She asked gently. Grace smiled politely. Yes, madam. She is fine. The neighbor hesitated. Something in the sound of the cries told her otherwise. But Grace closed the door with a calm nod. Outside, the neighbor shook her head and walked away, unsure what to do. And inside, the baby continued to cry, her tiny body trembling, unnoticed. The first spark of danger. The neglect had already begun to take its toll. The baby's body was weaker, her movements slower, her cries quieter. But Grace didn't see a child in need. She saw an annoyance to survive through minimally. One evening, Grace rocked the baby roughly, muttering to herself about how inconvenient this little life had become. She shook her slightly when the crying persisted, ignoring the fragile body beneath her hands. The baby's eyes blinked up, confused and scared, searching for warmth and love, but there was none. And outside, Vanessa's life continued, oblivious. She arrived home late, smelling of perfume and alcohol, smiling at messages on her phone. She glanced at the crib and said casually, "She's finally calm." The truth was, calm because she was too weak to cry. The days grew heavier. The apartment, once bright with Vanessa's expensive lights and flashy decor, now felt cold, hollow, and silent except for the tiny, desperate cries of a baby no one seemed to notice. Grace had changed. The polite, quiet girl who arrived months ago had become something else entirely. Her calm face now had irritation, frustration, and a growing harshness. Every cry from the baby seemed to grate against her like a sharp noise she couldn't tolerate. "Why won't you stop crying?" She snapped one afternoon, shaking the baby slightly when the weak cries continued. The baby flinched, her tiny body trembling. Hunger, fear, and loneliness had become constant companions. Grace had begun feeding the baby less, ignoring her needs whenever it was inconvenient. And in her mind, she convinced herself that the baby didn't matter, because her own life was more important. The baby's world. The baby was 3 months old, still too young to speak, too small to defend herself, but already aware of neglect. Her tiny hands reached out instinctively, seeking warmth, seeking comfort, seeking the one person meant to protect her. But no one came. Her cries became weak, sometimes fading into quiet whimpers. Hunger gnawed at her. Her tiny stomach ached. Her eyes, once bright and searching, now held a quiet sadness that could have broken anyone's heart. And still, Vanessa remained oblivious. Vanessa's life untouched. Vanessa's days were filled with flashing lights, loud music, and constant attention. She laughed in clubs, posed for selfies, posted glamorous videos online. Her phone chimed constantly, followers commented endlessly, and her world was alive, busy, loud. Her baby was a shadow in her life, a problem she had decided to outsource. "Is she sleeping?" Vanessa asked casual. She didn't important to see the baby coming home after hours
"Yes, madam,"
out. Grace said, smiling politely, hiding the truth. Vanessa nodded, satisfied, scrolling through her notifications, completely unaware that the baby had cried herself into exhaustion, too weak to lift her small hands anymore. A neighbor's suspicion. It wasn't until the neighbor returned that danger became real. She had walked by the apartment several times and always heard faint, pitiful cries. One evening, she knocked loudly. "Hello, can someone tell me if the baby is okay?" she called. Grace's polite mask appeared. "Everything is fine, madam. She's just sleeping," but the neighbor's instincts screamed otherwise. She hesitated, then left, unsure how to help, leaving the baby alone once again. The breaking point. By the end of the week, the baby had grown noticeably weaker. Her soft cries were fewer now, quieter, almost apologetic. Hunger had stolen her strength. Loneliness had stolen her joy. One night, Grace shook the baby roughly in frustration. "Why won't you be quiet?" she yelled. The baby's tiny body trembled, tiny lips quivering, eyes searching for a face, a hand, a voice. But Vanessa, as usual, didn't care. She returned late, stumbling through the door, smelling of perfume and alcohol. "She's finally calm," she said casually, scrolling her phone, completely unaware that calm did not mean safe. The baby's eyes blinked slowly, exhausted. Her tiny arms curled inwards, weak and small, a silent plea no one answered. The lesson so far: neglect can hurt just as deeply as violence. A child left unattended suffers in ways no one else can see. Wealth, fame, or beauty cannot replace love and care. And as the apartment grew darker that night, the baby's faint cries were a warning, one that no one yet understood. Grace's cruelty had grown bold. Vanessa's indifference had become deadly. The baby's life now hung by a thread, fragile, quiet, unnoticed. And the question loomed louder than ever: who would answer the cries no one heard? The night was unusually quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the dangerous kind. The kind that creeps in when something is wrong. Grace woke up suddenly. For the first time in months, the baby was not crying. At first, Grace felt relieved. Finally, silence. She lay back on the bed, stretching lazily. But minutes passed. Then more minutes. Still no sound. Something didn't feel right. Grace stood up and walked slowly toward the crib. "Hey," she muttered casually. No movement. She shook the crib lightly. Nothing. Her heart skipped. She touched the baby's tiny body. Cold, Grace froze. Panic rushed through her veins like fire. Her hands began to tremble violently. "No, no," she whispered. She lifted the baby in a rush, shaking her harder now. "Wake up! Wake up!" she screamed. The baby's head rolled weakly to the side. No cry. No movement. No strength. Grace screamed. Neighbors rushed in. Someone called for help. Someone shouted for a car. Another person ran to knock on Vanessa's door. But Vanessa wasn't home. She was at a party, laughing, dancing, recording videos, living. The rush to the hospital. By the time Vanessa arrived, the ambulance had already left. "What happened?" she asked angrily, annoyed more than afraid. No one answered her. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Machines beeped. Nurses rushed around. The baby lay on the bed, small, thin, and frighteningly still. A doctor finally turned to Vanessa. "Madam, how long has your baby been eating properly?" Vanessa frowned. "What kind of question is that? My house help feeds her." The doctor looked at her quietly. "This baby is severely malnourished." Vanessa's heart dropped. "What?" "Severe neglect," the doctor continued. "This didn't happen overnight." Vanessa staggered backward. She looked at the baby, really looked at her for the first time. The sunken cheeks. The fragile limbs. The weak chest struggling to rise. This was her child. And she hadn't noticed. The truth comes out. Grace was questioned. At first, she lied. "She eats well. She sleeps normally. I don't know what happened." But neighbors spoke. Nurses observed. Doctors knew. The truth poured out like water from a broken pot. Missed feedings. Rough handling. Long hours of crying. Neglect. Grace was arrested. Vanessa collapsed to the floor. She cried not because she had loved deeply, but because reality had finally caught her. "I didn't know," she whispered. But the question hung in the air. Did she ever ask? The final lesson. The baby survived, but barely. She lay in an incubator, connected to tubes, fighting silently. Vanessa stood outside the glass, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she asked the question she should have asked every day. "Has my baby eaten?" But now it sounded different. Now it sounded like regret. Moral of the story. Giving birth does not make you a mother. Love and responsibility do. Trusting someone with your child does not remove your duty. Neglect is a slow killer. A crying child is speaking. Listen. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share so you don't miss our next stories.